Do a quick review of absolute value equations, any equations that have the absolute value symbol. So to solve absolute value equations, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to isolate that absolute value to one side of the equation. Just kind of like you would when you're isolating a variable to one side, you're going to do the same thing with this absolute value. You're going to isolate it. Then the second thing you're going to do is you're going to form two possible equations. And the third step is you're going to solve each equation separately. And the last step is then you're going to check each solution. Do that check step. Now, one thing that you need to realize is that when you have an equation with an absolute value symbol, you will always have two solutions. So anytime you see an equation with absolute value symbol, you will always have two solutions, with the exception of this situation, where you have the absolute value equals some negative number. Your answer will be no solution. For example, the absolute value of x equals a -3. Well, there isn't any number that you could put in here that would give you a negative, because the definition of the absolute value is the distance from zero. Distance can only be positive, so you can never get a negative number. So when you see this situation, your answer is no solution. Otherwise, you'll always have two solutions. So let's look at an example. Our first example that we have is 5 times the absolute value of a -2x minus 3 minus 4 equals 11. So remember, our first step is we need to what? Isolate the absolute value. So I want to take this whole expression and get it by itself. And right now what they're doing is they're taking 5 times all of this, and then there's a -4. So I want to get rid of the 5 and the 4 so I can get this absolute value isolated. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides of the equation. And 11 plus 4 is 15. A -4 plus 4 is 0, right? So this whole thing plus 0 is going to give me this. All right? So I just brought this straight down. Now they're multiplying 5 because a number next to an absolute value symbol is the same thing as a number next to a parentheses, because this absolute value symbol is considered a grouping symbol. So since they're multiplying 5 times all of this, I'm going to divide both sides by 5 so that this becomes 1, and that leaves me with just what's in the absolute value symbol. And then 15 divided by 5 is 3. So I've now isolated the expression that's in the absolute value symbol. All right, so I've done step 1. All right, step 2 says form two possible equations. All right, well, the first possible equation is if this is kept the same, if I take out what's inside the absolute value symbol and set it equal to 3, assuming that it's positive, okay, assuming that this is the positive of that. And the other possibility is if I take this expression and take the negative of it. So those are my two possible equations. Taking the expression, taking the positive of it, and take the expression and taking the negative of it. And now, after I have set up two possible equations, my third step is solve each equation separately. So I'm going to do that. So here I have -2x minus 3 equals 3. I'm going to add 3 to both sides of the equation. 3 plus 3 is 6. This is 0, so -2x plus 0 is a -2x. Then I'm going to divide both sides by a -2 because they're multiplying by a -2. -2 divided by 2 is 1, so I'm left with 1x. 6 divided by -2 is a -3. So my solution here for this one is x equals a negative 3. But let's look at the other possibility. Now remember, this negative next to this parentheses means multiply. Think of this as an invisible negative 1. So I have to distribute that negative out to everything inside the equation. So a negative times a negative 2x gives me a positive 2x. And a negative times a negative 3 gives me a positive 3. So what I've done is I've really actually wrote the opposite. This was a negative, that was a negative, this is a positive, positive. So I wrote the opposite of what was inside. I'm going to solve now for x. Subtract 3 from both sides. This gives me 0, right? 0. 3 minus 3, that gives me 0. So 2x plus 3, or 2x plus 0 is 2x. They're multiplying by 2, so I'm going to divide everything by 2. So 2 divided by 2 gives me 1x. And 0 divided by any number will be always 0. 0 divided by any number is 0. So this is my second solution. Excuse me. So once I have my two solutions, my next step is to check each solution. So I'm going to do the check step. Let's take the original equation. I'm going to do my check step. Taking the original equation. Make sure when you're writing it that you transpose everything correctly. I'm going to substitute in negative 3 for every place there's an x. So this is going to give me 5 times the absolute value of negative 2. Remember, 2 next to a variable means multiply. So when I replace that x, I need to put it in parentheses so that I still indicate the multiplication. I'm going to simplify here. Absolute value symbols is just like a grouping symbol. It means you have to do what's inside the grouping symbol first. So I'm going to get 5. A negative 2 times a negative 3 is a positive 6. Bring everything else straight down. 6 minus 3 is 3. The absolute value of 3 is 3. I'm going to put it in parentheses because this number next to that means times, so I still have to indicate my multiplication. 5 times 3 is 15. 15 minus 4 is 11. So this worked out to be true, so I know that this solution works, x equals a negative 3. Now I need to test this x equals 0, so I need to do that check step. So I'm going to start with my original equation again. And I'm testing x equals 0, so I'm going to plug in 0 for x. So 5 times, I have to put negative 2, and when I replace that x with 0, I got to put it in parentheses because this means multiply. So I got to still indicate that that's being multiplied. A negative 2 times 0 is 0. 0 minus 3 is a negative 3. The absolute value of a negative 3 is a positive 3, but I still need to put it in parentheses because there's a times indicated here. 5 times 3 is 15. Whoops, this should be 11, sorry. And 15 minus 4 is 11 equals 11. So both of my solutions did work out. And that is your review for 2.6.